Theresa Burke here to give an update of Rachel's Vineyard activities in the month of October. We had a really busy month, and it began with an international leadership conference for Rachel's Vineyard that was held in Hildesheim, Germany. And it was a fantastic event, and I wanted you to meet some of the people who got things going over there. Let's start with Ann Arthur, who I actually met in Jamaica. She was part of the Rachel's Vineyard leadership team in Jamaica, and I went down there to do a leadership conference and clinical training for the Diocese of Kingston. And Anne and I hit it right off, and I immediately recognized her as a soul sister who would play an important role in the days ahead, but I had no idea what that would be, and I don't think she did either. We just made a prayer and a promise that God's perfect will would unfold. She, 3 days after I left, she found herself on an airplane on her way back to Germany, which was completely unexpected because her mother was ill, and she went home to care for her mom. And that ended up being a visit home that lasted for 3 years. And her mom recently passed, and during that time, she accomplished the complete translation of the Rachel's Vineyard manual, and then also found some women to plan it with. These are the two Christianes, and I'm going to encourage you to read the November Vine and Branches upcoming, because I did a very personal interview with both of them about their background, their childhood, growing up in communist Germany, all the persecutions, the post-war trauma, and their own lives, which God has used completely to prepare them both for their work in the ministry. As soon as I finished this interview, Christiane Wiedebusch, she had like what seemed to be a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital the night before the conference started. And she was going to play a big role in the registration and the organization. So we were thrown into a little bit of a crisis there. And I also did an interview with Christiane Kurpik. The two of these share a flat together right there on the grounds of the Cathedral for the Diocese of Hildesheim, and they run a prayer meeting, a charismatic prayer meeting, and a ministry called Jacob's Well. And it's under that, with the blessing of the bishop, that they've actually been able to launch the ministry of Rachel's Vineyard and then let it spread throughout Germany. So here we are in a courtyard after Christiane was taken to the hospital. We went out to lunch, and we were continuing to problem solve. And right before all this happened, they took me on a little driving tour of Hildesheim. So I wanted to share with you some of the photos. So sit back and relax, and let's look at some German architecture before all the conference begins. I think these houses are so cute, and I love to draw, so I took a lot of pictures of the architecture. And I thought these are just little interesting pictures of a very ancient walled city Hildesheim is. And the oldest cathedral in there was built in 1820, believe it or not. And this was a Jewish square where a temple had been burned down. The people were all inside worshiping it, and they blocked the doors. And so this is the memorial that sits there right in the middle of all these residential homes. It was hard to imagine, you know, that scene many years ago. This was another very wealthy home. Look at the artwork on that. I thought it was very beautiful. Here's the cathedral right across from that temple. And this is one of the town squares. There's the well where everybody used to come to get their water back in the old days. And some more interesting buildings. A little woodsman as people prepare for the Oktoberfest. So we went into a number of basilicas and different churches, and this particular church was taken over by Lutherans and remodeled, and they took down a lot of the Catholic artwork, but they did leave the ceiling, which I thought was lovely there. And this is probably the most hideous cross of Jesus I've ever seen, but it's modern art that they put into that cathedral. This particular cathedral is right across from Christiane's apartment there in the square where the diocese has all its buildings, and they just completed renovations worth $58 million. And there's the bishop giving a tour. The light wasn't so good because it was at night, sorry about that, but he was giving a tour to us and some Jewish leaders who came to visit. And since they opened the doors, they've had something like 2 million visitors a day coming, and all the brochures of Rachel's Vineyard are in the back of that church. So here's the monastery in the back. And this is a very famous, it goes way back in German history, rose bush that even after World War II, the rose was blooming, and that was a sign of life. And there were stories and stories of different emperors who came there to pray. In fact, the first one who decided to build the cathedral because he found the spot of this rose, and it was a sign of the presence of the Blessed Mother. You can read about it. It's very famous in any Wikipedia about the rose of Hildesheim. Here is the leadership conference. We drove about 3 or 4 hours south so that we could be in the middle of the country. And these are the participants who came from all over. They came from Poland, from Lithuania, from Slovakia, and from throughout Austria and all of Germany. Here is Claudia. Some of you may remember her because she runs HLI and Rachel's Vineyard in Austria, in Vienna actually. And she is engaged to be married to this wonderful Philip, who runs a family foundation, and they are going to both be moving to Bavaria, where he's from, and running their family foundation. And I know that they're going to start up a Rachel's Vineyard site in Bavaria. So they were seeking members of their team from other parts of Germany. And here is the team from Vienna who came down for the conference. And you can see Sylvia, Father Manfred there, and some of the other people, Martina. This is Justina. She's from Poland. She's the new site leader of Poland, who will be starting a new site after Hannah passed it on to her. She'll be starting one in the north, and there's also a Polish site in the south. This is Dr. Josef Lingenhole. He is an OBGYN from Switzerland. And after being at the 4 days of our conference there, he wants to organize a similar conference for all doctors in Switzerland. So we're excited about that. That'll be in 2015. Here I am with Father Manfred, who runs Rachel's Vineyard and Priests for Life in Vienna, and Monsignor Prater, who's an assistant to Bishop Kung. We had an excellent meeting with him. It went on for probably 3 hours. We talked about everything, the problems in the church, the pro-life movement. He is a real friend and a wonderful confidant, and he was also sharing some struggles that he's enduring as a Lone Ranger, trying to uphold some orthodoxy and some values in the church, which is becoming a difficult battle with all the liberalism. This is Bishop Laun of Salzburg. I went down and had a nice meeting with him, and then I did a public lecture, and there he is sitting right in the front row listening and taking notes, and he's really a very pro-life, very wonderful supporter of Rachel's Vineyard, and they're trying to get one going down in Salzburg now. This is Sabine Bohler. She runs a radio station, and I did a interview with her for Radio Horeb, and this broadcasts throughout Germany and all the German-speaking places. And we did a really good interview about Rachel's Vineyard, and also talked about some of the issues confronting the pro-life movement in Germany. There's a nun who came to our conference. She only slipped in for about 20 minutes of it. She is a part of the community of nuns there at the Schoenstatt Center that we were having our retreat at. And as she was listening to me speak, she was very triggered into memories that she had kind of forgotten about. And she was up all night and came back in the morning crying and talked to Sylvia, actually. And Sylvia brought her to me. And that day I was teaching facilitation skills and showing techniques for psychodrama and techniques for helping people through memories. And so we actually used her. She offered herself as somebody who we could demonstrate with, and we used her as someone that we did work with. And it was very, very touching because she was able to go up to post-abortive women and say, I'm sorry, because her memories from World War II were being a nurse. And after the war, a lot of people were having abortions because they were victims of rape and victims of war trauma, and so they were just lined up for abortion after abortion. As a nurse, it was her job to facilitate and assist in these. And then she became a nun, and here at the age of 94, all these years later, she cried and was shaking and was revealing all these traumatic memories. And by the power of the group and being able to go around to all the people, she had an unbelievable healing. And here is the leaders of Rachel's Vineyard from the new site starting up in Berlin in West Germany. And this man now runs an interdenominational church, but he's actually an ex-Catholic priest. Here is, after I finished the leadership conference, I got in a car and drove 9 hours with the priest from Poland who took me to Vienna. And there at the ITI, we began preparations for the leadership training retreat, which is actually doing an entire retreat on the weekend. And these are some of the participants. Most of them were abortion survivors who grew up in Eastern Bloc countries. A lot of the group was from Lithuania. There was a gal from Slovakia. There were only 2 Americans on the team, and they were all there and participated in grieving abortion loss or the abortions of their mothers or being abortion survivors. The Rachel's Vineyard team from Poland, this is them, and lively gals. I had a wonderful time with my Polish sisters because, for anyone who doesn't know it, my grandfather came from Poland. And my grandmother taught me a lot of Polish language because she lived to 95 and she lived with us for a number of years. Here's some other people from the conference. There's Hannah in the middle who translated the Rachel's Vineyard into Polish. And here they gave me this picture of Our Lady of Czestochowa, and I was really excited about that because, believe it or not, I do not have that picture in my house, even though I have a very profound devotion to her. And I was praying to her all the time at Our Lady of Czestochowa, which is up in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, the National Shrine, which is the home of Rachel's Vineyard that my cousin Evelyn runs. And throughout my sickness with RSD, I used to go there and pray all the time in a wheelchair to the Black Madonna for a healing, so that I would be able to get back on my feet. So I have a very, very special devotion to her. And I grew up at that shrine polkaing with my father, who loved to polka. This is the shrine of St. Michael, which we visited. This is in Austria, and it's attached to a Franciscan Monastery that was built in 800 AD up in Austria. I just cannot believe that 800 years after the death of Christ that this building was done, and we went to tour it after the conference was over. Here is Schoenstatt Chapel. They were celebrating 100 years. They just finished a big anniversary. And here's the poster for German Rachel's Weinberg. And here's the Polish title. It's Winika Racheli in Polish. And here's an article about Rachel's Vineyard First Retreat. And of course, Edie Gutierrez from Colorado, Denver, Colorado, is the one who went over there to run their first retreat to help Hannah out as they launched it. And this was the article they bought to me from Poland so that I could see the story about it, which was very exciting. Here we are, my Polish sisters again. And here's scenes again from the Rachel's Vineyard International Leadership Conference. I think there were about 45 people who attended. And there's one of the nuns from the center. They wear this post-World War II, it looks like a nurse outfit, because that was the profession when they began their order. They were all involved in nursing after the war. Here is me with a priest from Slovakia. And there's Father Joseph from Poland. And he's the one who drove us from Austria, a 9-hour road trip. Here's another picture of the retreat team from the International Theological Institute. And I was able to spend the whole week there. I had meetings with all sorts of students. I was able to meet with Micheal, who translated the Rachel's Vineyard Retreat Manual into Chinese. And she was able to give me a report on everything that's been happening with that. And here's some other scenes from the ITI. The HLI Pregnancy Center in Salzburg, this is a picture of it, and actually a year ago all the windows were smashed on the front of it, and they had to actually close the center. They moved across the street. Here's a little chapel across the street. It is a tiny closet of a building, but they just began to pray every day. They had intercessory adoration for finding a new home, since they couldn't work in that with all the windows broken and the rent was very expensive. And here is the executive director of HLI. His name is Johannes Bucher, and he was a wonderful host for my time in Salzburg. And he was also the one who had the brainchild of Our Lady of Czestochowa traveling the world, the Coast to Coast tour, which Father Peter West has been the custodian of that pilgrimage picture icon. And that all it came from him. He's the one that organized that whole thing. He's a wonderful guy, doing a great job over in Europe despite incredible persecution, which we are able to talk about. Here is the Byzantine Chapel, which is newly done at the HLI, and it's students who are making these icons on the ceiling. They were painting them, and they have icon painting classes. Dr. Gintis Fatushka and his wife Diva, they're good friends. He's the psychology professor from Lithuania who teaches at ITI, and I was able to spend an afternoon with them, and I did teach a number of his classes. I always do when I go there, his psychology classes, and inspire the students, and it's always a very wonderful time. And there's his wife, Diava. Of course, it was great to get home after all the travels and lectures and different events and interviews, and I found this on my perfectly clean room from the kids. After that, I had a training for the St. Vladimir's Orthodox Seminary in Yonkers, New York. This was on a Friday, and the students, there was about 40 of them who came. A very lively, engaging day from 9 to 5, where I was able to teach all about post-abortion trauma and healing. Very, very good use of my time. And here's just some scenes from the place. This is their chapel, which I thought was very beautiful. It's a Russian Orthodox chapel, and they have a collection of the world's oldest books that were escaped from the war, during the war, that are housed in this seminary. And here we are outside the event, and that's Father John Micheal, who sometimes travels with me, helps me lift things, helps me organize things, ran the book table, and he's a good friend. Here's the Portland, Oregon team, and these are many people who are also on the team of Grief to Grace and Rachel's Vineyard. That's Terry Lennox down the bottom on your right. She runs Rachel's Vineyard in Boise, Idaho, and the two gals run Rachel's Vineyard in Portland, Oregon. And there we are after our retreat out there. So this is what's been going on, and here's another picture of Ann Arthur.